All right. Well, we're going to get underway. I first want to introduce us and the curriculum. So I'm Chris Turner. I'm very proud to serve on the board of directors for the American Conservative Union, the organization that hosts CPAC every year. Very happy to be here with our studio audience and our esteemed panel to talk about the campus fight. I don't know if, maybe it hadn't broken through with a lot of people, but college campuses have become a bit of a problem politically for us. We've seen the left kind of running up numbers with us, and frankly, as you know, I'm 48 years old. I have a wonderful, beautiful, much younger wife, and we've got kids. We've got an 18-year-old, and we've got a 6, and we've got a 3.5, and we're, and again, she and I both have college degrees and graduate degrees, and everybody in our family's got graduate degrees, and we're frankly, we're not in a buying mode right now for college tuition. We're not so interested in sending our children into a socialist meat grinder. And it's a problem because that credential point, college degree, is important for their economic viability and ability to grow. Oh, amen. I hear Hillsdale.
That's a great answer.
Liberty,
Hillsdale.
what's up?
There are some good ones out there, but by and large, like I'm a University of Texas graduate.
Myself?
Go Horns.
Oh, okay.
But you know what? I'm a Texan. I would not pay for my son to go to the University of Texas under any circumstances.
No, neither would I.
I just wouldn't. I wouldn't do it. So I think this is very appropriate. We've seen literally, the battles on these campuses, and this is a fight we must win. This is a fight we must win. I think Bill Bennett, former Secretary of Education, has said it, and he was quoting somebody from probably back during the days of the ancient Greeks who said it, Juvenal or whoever it may have been, but he said the top 2 decisions any society ever makes for itself are, number 1, who's going to educate the children, and number 2, what are we going to teach them? And I would say on the right, and this organization, Leadership Institute, from which both our panelists hearken, notwithstanding, we've not done a great job on that front as conservatives. And as a parent myself, we continue to invest our money into a machine that is turning right-thinking, hard-working young kids into socialist activists, and we've got to stop that. So I do want to preface by saying that we have a very right-thinking young person who's at Ole Miss. Clayton Turner, my nephew, is going to be in the hall handing out. There he is.
All right.
Hey, Clayton.
So there he is.
What's up, Clayton?
There's Clayton. He's going to be passing out little sheets of paper if you guys have any questions. So if you wouldn't mind just writing questions down on the paper that Clayton provides to you, please write in block print if you can, because I'm getting old and I can't. Even though my dad was a doctor who wrote like scribble scratch, like I don't do so well with it. So please try to write legibly, and we'll try to address a few questions at the tail end. So with that, I want to turn it over. I'm really excited because Leadership Institute has been at this for a while, and I happen to be one of your acolytes. As a young person, I went through Morton's training. So I'm one of you people. I want to introduce, and actually just for Alexandra and Stephen both, why don't you just take a second, starting with Alexandra, and just introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Well, my name's Alexandra Knowles. I am the Director of Youth Leadership Programming at Leadership Institute. I'm so sorry for the quality of my voice today. I was just so excited to be at CPAC. Maybe screamed a little bit too loud yesterday. So we're going to go ASMR style for the rest of this. Just kidding. But I am the Director of Youth Leadership Programming at Leadership Institute, and I travel across the country teaching young activists how to effectively organize and communicate for the ideas and the causes that they care about.
That's great. Stephen?
Yes. Hello, everybody. My name's Stephen Rowe. I'm originally from the great state of Montana. Anybody else from Montana? Hey, yeah. No one raised their hand. That's what usually happens every single time. There's not a lot of us, but we punch above our weight. There's only 1 million of us total, a 3-to-1 ratio, 3 cows for every human. And there were 7 black guys in Montana before I left. Now there's 6. Beautiful state, though. Couldn't recommend you go more. That's where I got my first chops in politics. Spent a year working for Turning Point USA, and now I've been with Leadership Institute for almost 4 years now. I'm a deputy director there, and it's my job to go to college campuses oftentimes, speak at conferences with Turning Point USA, Young Americans for Liberty, Young Americans Foundation, the list goes on, and educate college students on how they can be more effective in their messaging. In addition to that, also helping people of older generations as well get on social media and get involved in the digital world. So I love what I do. I love Leadership Institute, and I'm happy to be with you today.
Yeah, great. Well, we're honored that you would be here. So why don't we start, just set the stage, maybe, and I know you're going to take us through some curriculum, and the point for everybody in the room and everybody listening, the direct action training sessions at CPAC are about tactical level, executable items that will make you a more effective activist or persuasive communicator right now. So for everybody here, this is a non-theoretical discussion. This isn't about what happened 90 years ago, and it's not what's going to happen in 90 years. This is about November 3rd, 2020, period. So what we are hoping for, guys, is through our conversation, for everybody listening, to be able to at least walk out of here with one thing, or maybe two things, that will help them either, if they are on a campus today, be more effective at, frankly, flipping voters or awakening minds. Like we want to use one of my favorite movies that was unfortunately made by some extreme leftists, The Matrix. We want to be passing out the red pill. If we can pass out the red pill to as many kids on campus, like that'd be great. Let them see the truth. Or if they're a parent of a kid on campus or a grandparent, to give them maybe a tactical level thing that they can do to help out. So we want to think about, this is November 3rd oriented. But maybe you guys might have a good war story, like just to warm things up. Is there a story from campus that you personally went through that was just particularly either terrifying or eye-opening? What comes to mind? What would you share with us if you want to say, hey, here's what it's like out there right now?
Yeah, absolutely. If it's okay. So I wish I had some terrifying war story of something happening bad to me. Unfortunately, I've been a little blessed in that respect. I've had some colleagues that have gone through some rough experiences. One of them got licked, which is a very infamous event.
This is true.
I've had some friends whose phones have been taken out of their hands and thrown down a bridge. A lot of volatile attacks. One of my good friends, Hayden Williams, who was on the stage with the president last year because he got punched in the face at UC Berkeley. So the threat is very real on college campuses across this country, that's for sure. But I will say that there is a sense of optimism as well, in the sense that most college kids tend to be apathetic rather than care about a political persuasion. What we tend to find when we go on college campuses is they care about who the next bachelor is or the bachelorette. And it's going to see, I don't know if Madison's going to be the one, and I don't know how it's going to turn out for those of us watching this season, but they care about that type of stuff. They care about football, and they don't really talk about politics very much. And this is a huge opening for conservatives to really communicate with them our ideas. And it's essential that we do so, that's for sure. I think one of the bigger things that you find in success stories is a person that goes, I never thought of it like that. And what you find oftentimes is they just haven't been exposed to our ideas. And when we get that chance, we get that opportunity, we have a real time to change their mind or to open them to a new idea.
So, and just quickly, because that magic phrase, right, the reaction in a conversation of, I've never thought about that.
Yes.
Wow.
So I want to stop on that for a moment, because in the world of, in my personal world of kind of, we're in the business of marketing political candidates and causes, and so we're kind of a sales organization. And there has been, in the world of selling, which again, campaigns are all about, we're about selling ideas. There has been, through my lifetime, a sense that if you're in a conversation with somebody and you're trying to win them over, and you can feel good about yourself if they say something like, yeah, I've thought that for a long time too, and that sounds, we're on the same wavelength. Now, as a salesperson, I think it applies to politics. We're trained to feel good about that reaction. Like, wow, they agree with me. Yeah, we're vibing. It's the same thing.
We're vibing. I like
That's right. And I'm dating myself. But in modern sales, there's a new generation of sales that I think touches on that magic phrase, which is, in modern sales, they teach you, you haven't won any conversation when they say they've been thinking along those lines. You haven't won anything. What you want is for someone to stop, look at you and say, wow, I've never thought about it that way.
Yes.
That's the magic we're looking for. And so as a tactical, again, I'm going to interrupt and grab these little nuggets for our listeners and our
Please.
studio audience. That is the magic moment when you've got an opportunity, right? Look for those moments and entice them through good questions to getting them to a point where they're like, never thought about it that way. So thanks for that. That's a great nugget. Alexandra?
Definitely. Well, I'm glad that Stephen has been so sheltered that he's never experienced some liberal backlash on a college
By the way,
campus.
Stephen, for everybody listening, is 6'7". He weighs 462 pounds of muscle, which is why, and he's an African-American from Montana, which is why nobody screws with him.
That's probably true.
Quite intimidating.
Absolutely.
I unfortunately do not fit that description, so I guess I'm the prime target, I suppose. But I worked on a race in 2017 in Virginia, and if anyone is from Virginia or is paying attention to politics at the time, it was a pretty volatile climate back 2-3 years ago, especially as there were some Confederate monument controversies that were spruing up in the gubernatorial race. And as a result, I was the youth director on a campaign, and my job was to go from college campus to college campus, identifying and organizing these students. So I have had a table flipped in my face. I have had green paint thrown on me. I have had my hair ripped out of my head. Just really fun, wonderful things.
Wow.
That at the rite of passage for every college student these days, right?
Yeah, especially if you're conservative.
It's tough.
So why don't, so in other words, guys, we got some warriors up here. They're not just talking the talk, they've walked the walk, right? As they're like fist bumping and flexing biceps, which I really like. Because it is, and it's amazing actually that you got to be a warrior on campus these days if you're on the right. I mean, that's reality. So why don't you give us a couple of your thoughts on the campus fight and how we can win it? Stephen, you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to kick things off here. And I think one of the best things I can communicate with people oftentimes, especially people who really care about politics, all of us here, we're at like a level 10, like black belt knowledge of politics. And we have to realize just for a second that most college kids are not there. And so when you mention something like Austrian economics, or you say Friedrich Hayek, these are not things that ring bells for them, but maybe, huge alarms of yeses for us in our head. And so we have to meet people where they are fundamentally. And I think that kind of comes to the fact that we have the best form of communication ever that's been passed down to us from generation to generation. It's fundamentally how we've communicated as a history, as humanity, and we need to keep doing it, and we've kind of lost our roots a little bit. But that's the essence of storytelling. It's telling stories of success, telling stories of why capitalism cures, and telling stories of the horrors of socialism. And when you tell a story, you're able to connect with someone for a second. Even just hearing me just say for a second, let me tell you a story. Everyone instantly starts to slowly fade into it and hear what's going on. And what I want to see more of from a bunch of people listening to this podcast, everyone in this room right now, is to tell your story, because we, as conservatives, have gone through some trials. We have gone through tribulations, and no one can take your story away from you, and that makes it uniquely yours. And don't be afraid to tell the stories of other people, because stories are really, at the end of the day, what gets people interested, gets them involved. And one big mistake I see a lot of conservatives make out there is they will throw, look at this GDP graph of why school choice works better. We know school choice works better, but you're throwing this graph, this pie chart at me, and it's a little not interesting at all. And I got enough of that in my economics course, so I'm not paying attention to you now. And so we got to break through that for a second, and storytelling is one of the most powerful forms that we can do it. And it starts with a hero, it starts with rising, it continues on to rising action, and then we lead and finish with the point that they can take away home and they can recite back to other people. I just heard this amazing story of this individual who escaped Venezuela and the horrors of socialism, and now he's here praising, how awesome America is and how evil the other place was. And you hear that story and you're like, I want to tell somebody else this story. I want to communicate this. And the best thing we can do in addition to that is just add a recording layer to that. If you point your phone at your face and start talking, it's amazing how viral you can go sometimes. And I really encourage people to do that, because a lot of individuals will think, I need this fancy piece of camera equipment, or I need, I don't have the clout to do this. But I promise you, if you really just start recording and start sharing your story with the world, both in person and online, you're going to start winning a lot more hearts and minds, because they see that you're a human fundamentally, and then they hear your story, and then they continue to kind of go from there.
So I'm going to put you on the spot, Alexandra.
Sure.
Tell us a story. The way the Leadership Institute would teach everybody to tell a story. Do you have a compelling one that's moved you personally, or your personal story, and how it should be told?
Sure. So I was actually going to piggyback off of what Stephen said.
Please.
In that I think what you're touching on with the storytelling aspect is that conservatives needs to stop shying away from the emotional appeals, right? This is something that we see that the left tactically do very well. Conservatives, I think that, I don't know what comes first, the chicken or the egg, but I think that we're very logical people. So when we're talking about what we believe, why we believe it, we tend to dive into the policy points. All right, let's break down this tax code line by line. Why is this unethical, or why is this not the most efficient thing you could do? Why don't we talk about how certain policies are inhumane, how they're unjust? Let's dive into that emotional appeal, especially when you're working with students on college campuses, like Stephen was talking about, when you're telling a story. You need to have that emotional appeal if you really want to connect with these students. Conservatives on college campuses exist. They are just supporting these leftist candidates because they're the only ones going out and talking to them. I think if we go out them, like you said, meet them where they are. Get out there, just talk to them, figure out what their stories are, figure out what emotional appeals, tap into their hearts and minds, we'll be really successful. In terms of storytelling though, I always tell students, when you're out there tabling on campus, don't go up to students and say, hey, can I talk to you for a second? Go up to a student and say, hey, do you like freedom? Do you believe in the Constitution? What do you think about the First Amendment? Go into it with that. That's such an organic conversation starter, and it almost lets them tell you their story. Okay, so they tell you, yes, I do believe in freedom. Prove it. Why? Why do you believe in freedom? Then you start that storytelling aspect that Stephen was just touching on that I think is critical in getting a message.
And I love that. So again, I'm going to stop you right there because it's another amazing thing you just said. The word why, the question why.
Yes.
And I'd love for you to expound on this a little bit, but I think that conservatives do this clinical approach to everything, right? Where we say in our minds, like, if only these people knew what I know, no one would ever vote for a socialist. Well, that is factually untrue. That is untrue. If we could immediately cascade all knowledge that we possess, not every single person would interpret that knowledge exactly the same way and immediately become conservative. It's false. But we just believe this in our minds. And we get impatient. So we want to boil it down to a bar chart and say, look at this, you fool.
Yes.
Right? And I think the great point here as a takeaway is real stories matter. Stories that are emotional matter, because every single buying decision that you make in your life as a human being is an emotional decision. And the Consumer Reports part of it is just justification. When you go in to buy a car, you see the car, you fall in love with the car, and then you go figure out how to justify it to your spouse intellectually.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, I know
That's
exactly
really
what
good.
outfit I'm going to wear in this. I know what wonderful vacations we're going to take in this car.
That is it. And so the why question is something that not only I think, and again, I'd love to have maybe Stephen expound on this, but I don't hear us, I think it's a twofold problem. I don't hear us asking voters why a lot, and more importantly, for the richness of the story, we don't ask ourselves our own why. I think it's really interesting to address, college kids who are engaged and say, what are you doing here? Well, I'm here for this. Okay, well, why is that? And it's, well, because I think that education is about, okay, well, why do you believe that? And there's an exercise, again, in kind of self-exploration called the 5 whys. And if you ask someone the question why 5 times in a row, why is that? Why is that? Why is that? Oh, that's so interesting. Why is that? If you get to 5 whys, you're going to get to the truth.
Yes.
And so the way to start is to put a mirror in front of your face and ask yourself the 5 whys. Why are you in this room here? Why are you listening to this podcast? Why are you training people listening to a podcast? And because it's going to go back to, again, it's Alexandra's great-grandmother who came over, Stephen's, uncle who was a soldier. It's somebody who taught us about duty and honor and country. But there's emotion there and there's power there. And so I don't know if, again, feel free to push back and
absolutely.
say I'm crazy.
No, I think you have 25% of an amazing message, and emotion is 100% everything, right? People don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care, fundamentally. So you have to present that emotion, but I'll also add 3 C's onto the emotion. And the first one is credibility. Why you? Why are you the messenger telling me this story? And we all have some particular set of playing cards in our hand as to what we can speak towards in our particular, superpower, right? And we need to lean on that a little bit. So what is the credibility that you're offering, as a grandfather, as a mother, As a college student, it's an incredible amount of credibility. You know, we put college students at Leadership Institute's Campus Forum on Fox News every single day. People want to listen to college students, so credibility is there, and you have it whether you think you do or no. But tap into that. The second part is contrast, right? And that is, why is this the alternative? Why is this different, or how is this better than the status quo? And there has to be a little bit of a contrast in that message. Otherwise, you're kind of missing the mark in terms of delivering it in a succinct, powerful way. And then the other one is connection. And I think this is the most important one. And it's so what? It's answering the question of so what? You're telling me this, so what? Why should I care? Why does this matter? How does this relate to me? And I promise you, if I got a toothache, today, I would care more about my toothache than 1,000 kids that are starving in Africa. And that's how we're wired as humans to care about that. So how do we can make our message distilled into that toothache for the average person and connect it with that individual? A good example of that is, again, let's imagine that there's a story out there that was happening, an instance of liberal bias and abuse on a college campus. It happens literally everywhere all the time, probably 2 times today before 3 o'clock, right? It happens all the time. And let's say it happens here in the CPAC area in National Harbor. Well, then how is that connecting to someone in California? Why should they care about what's going on here? That's the other side of the country, right? How does that connect with someone in Colorado? And so how can you bring this and make this message even larger and make sure it hits that person directly is the best thing that you can do. So an instance like that, Whippy, we see this all the time, happening from UC Berkeley all the way to NYU. Time and time again, these college students are being picked on, bullied, and harassed on their college campus. But if we take that message back for a second, you saw what I did there. I said we see this all the time from California to New York. So now we're talking about all of America. And so when you're compelling your creating your message and trying to deliver it, always think about that connection aspect. How can I actually connect to the person in front of me? Because a lot of times, again, and this will happen, you'll go to the hub tomorrow, and for those of us listening who've been at CPAC before, there's a giant area where all the vendors are, and everyone's trying to sell you their talking points and their awesome free stuff, which is awesome. I take all of it in a bag and worry about it later. But when they do that, they kind of drop those talking points for a second, but they don't say, and this is why this matters for you, the person in front of me right now, right? And this is a talking point for everybody, not a talking point for you. And so when you have that talking point, and if you ever have one in the near future, how can you make that personalized? How can you tailor that to the individual? And I think it starts with a lot of what you were saying, asking those 5 whys. Why do you believe that? Why are you doing that? And all of that. It really distills down, and then you can really send a message. So that's the message. So we've got that emotion, but we also have the connection, the contrast, and the credibility. All of that together combines to make a powerful, excellent message.
I love that, and that's usable for people. So Alexandra.
Yeah.
You have anything to add to his brilliant reportage so far? Anything you forgot? Did Stephen fall down on the job?
I forget a lot, so.
Well, I think what we should be asking students when we're canvassing, or if you're out there, if you're a college student and you're tabling on your college campus, don't leave a conversation without asking someone, what is the issue that's most important to you? I start off all of my trainings at Leadership Institute by having all of my students take a second, and I'm like, just close your eyes. Think about what brought you into this room today? For everyone here at CPAC, what brought you to CPAC today? What makes you a conservative? Was it your grandparents sitting you down and making you watch the news, explaining it to you? Was it a piece of philosophy that you just fell in love with and felt really encompassed your morals and your values? Is it an issue that you are just rabid for, and that's what gets you to the ballot box? It's November. Whatever that is, use that as fuel. And when you are out working on a campaign, when you're recruiting on college campuses, keep that in the back of your mind. You might be that thing that untaps it for someone else. On these college campuses, the studies show that how you vote when you're 18 is going to be how you vote for the rest of your life, typically. So think about the power that you have as an 18-year-old or to a 22-year-old on a college campus. You have the ability to impact how those young, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed freshmen are going to vote for the rest of their lives. That's a big opportunity, so definitely don't take it for granted and try to make that emotional connection by asking them the why, asking them the issue that's most important to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's, listening to you guys, it's actually, it's an amazing challenge actually for all of us, because what you're telling our audience here and listening in is that, frankly, we're probably not spending nearly enough time as activists exploring our own motivations. And, again, conservatives, Republicans, we spend, to bring sales terminology into it, we spend a lot of time on what's called business pain, meaning we share kind of the veneered version of ourselves with other people. We talk about things like it's an issue that matters to me, or freedom, or it's my duty. Yeah. to vote or whatever it is, but that's an aggregate level experience share. It's not a personal share. And so what I seem to be hearing is maybe we need to spend some alone time and be thinking about it with ourselves or with friends and family and get down to why is it really? Because I've had personal conversations with people and you ask that magical question, and this is for everybody as a takeaway. Always see if we can start a conversation and get to a place where they're willing to share a top issue, right? Whatever your top issue may be. And let's say somebody says it's education. And I find it interesting to say, all right, well, okay, let's just set the stage here. Because is it education because you saw an article in the front page of the paper today and you thought it was terrible? Or is it education because somebody you know personally, yourself, your mother, your father, your siblings, were either really, really let down by the system or really, really uplifted? Because I want to know what kind of conversation I'm having with you. And in many cases, when I've gone through that little exercise, people will say, well, actually, education is not my top issue. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, what is?
I'm just kidding.
They something off the top of their head.
Because when we engage in political conversations, there's a degree of programming that kicks in. Mm. We all have a sense of the rhythm of that conversation. And I remember there was like an Audi television commercial a couple of years ago where they were walking around reading scripts about cars. Like it's programming where we identify a political conversation and then we go into a bit of a rhythm. It's almost like going into the Gap as a male and somebody comes up to me and says, hey, can I help you?
No, I'm just looking. I'm just looking, okay?
I'm just looking. Now, that's called programming. when in fact, I'm there to buy something, but I just say, even if I'm there to buy something, I say I'm just looking because it's what the programming tells me to do. So anyway, it's kind of
I'm actually a
humbling.
little stubborn, too. I'll a little wander around the store lost for a second because I didn't ask for help. But
and we've all been trapped in there. So anyway, I don't know if I've hit the point. I'd feel free to welcome feedback on this, but that's kind of the humbling part of what I'm hearing from you all is maybe we need to spend some alone time, get to our own core issue, and then share that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And just expanding on your point about how we get into a rhythm, especially as conservatives or activists, I think that the rhythm that I see conservatives, especially those running for office or working on campaigns, the rhythm that they're in is they're targeting, the generation that is 50 plus, where 1/3 of the voting bloc currently are millennials and Gen Zers. That's crazy. We need to stop ignoring this. I think the conservatives have gotten a bad rap for ignoring certain minorities, especially young people, or not ignoring them, but not doing everything they can to reach out and message their policies to those people. So I think the biggest thing for 2020, get uncomfortable, get out of that pattern. Go talk to those young people, meet them where they are, and explain why our policies are humane, why they are just, why they are libertarian motivated. And I think that's going to go a long way.
Yeah, I really like that sentence, that get uncomfortable, because a lot of us are very comfortable in the circles that we exist in, right? And for a second, even beyond college students, but especially college students, let's break out of that bubble for a second and be uncomfortable and have those uncomfortable conversations. For a while, it's like we've been taught for quite a while to not, try and argue or debate with people sometimes. And if we disagree, I'm just going to be quiet and let you talk. But sometimes it's the brave person in a college classroom that stands up to the teacher and says, I disagree with you. And there's 10 other people in that room that think the exact same thing, but they didn't have the bravery to just stand up and say something. And so that is an essence of get uncomfortable. And it kind of reminds me of Eminem, a famous rapper. He's one of the 4 top rappers on.
We know who Eminem is.
Oh, perfect.
Dude.
I just wanted to, I don't know sometimes. I don't know. So Eminem has a movie called 8 Mile, and there's a song in it called Lose Yourself. And the most important thing in this song, you don't have to know the rest of the song. It's great. You can check it out later. But it says, you only have one moment. Will you capture it or just let it slip? And he says, Mom, spaghetti after that. But that one moment thing for just a second, there's so many moments. There's going to be more than one in our lifetimes, but we've seen these pass us by time and time again as conservatives, especially on campus, where we don't stand up or we don't defend ourselves or we don't talk, and we just let that moment pass. We let it slip, so to speak. And we need more courageous conversations around the topics that we care about, whether it comes to just being loud and proud about being pro-life to caring about the economy. I think it's all essential for success. And if you don't have those conversations, if you aren't the one that stands up, or if a college student tries to, approach you with the opposing side and you're not willing to share your side, then you just let that moment slip. And we have to stop doing that. We have to be more proactive than reactive when it comes to sharing our philosophy.
Yeah, and I love that. And everybody agree with that? It's pretty, I mean, it seems pretty sound. And look, if we don't think this notion of programming is real, let me utter a phrase. There are two things you don't talk about. Everybody in this room and everybody listening knows the two things we don't talk about. I'm not even going to say it because we already know.
We already know. We already know.
I didn't ask you to fill in the blanks. I asked you to do it in your own mind.
That's the programming.
Everybody knows. But guess what? That's programming. That is programming of your mind. Guess who is not abiding by that rule? The left.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're talking about both. And any contention, by the way, that the left is not the young left is not a religious generation is kidding themselves. Socialism is a religion. It is irrational, right? People are literally willing to commit economic suicide, cultural suicide. They're willing to drink out of a Dixie cup from a guru, right? That's what socialism is. So they're not abiding by our rules. Two things you don't talk about. We need to talk about those things.
We do.
And the Leadership Institute and Stephen and Alexandra, I think that's a fantastic takeaway to say, again, it's almost like self-help, but lean into the discomfort.
Yeah.
Be courageous because everyone is looking to us to be courageous. And for the young people, and I'd love for you to and we're going to take a few questions, I think. Clayton, if you've got some questions to bring up. As parents and grandparents, our little ones need to hear from us.
Yes.
And I think it's leftist propaganda to say, you should just let the young kid learn on his own or her own. Well, guess what? We've never done that. They don't know. And so guess what? When we don't, there's something to say about cultures and families and companies.
Yeah, and if I could add just a little bit too. There was a recent study done by the National Association of Scholars that found that that professors on college campuses, they interviewed over 12,000 professors, and then they donated to Democrats over Republicans by a 95-to-1 ratio. 95-to-1. For every one professor donating to a Republican, there are 95 professors out there donating to a Democrat. So we know that these professors and administrators are not sharing a conservative message in their classrooms, and if they won't, then we will. It is literally up to us to do this. Otherwise, we're just going to let this generation slip.
I love that. And look, we got a couple questions that I think are great in the time that we have remaining. And maybe I'll go to Alexandria and we'll start with you. These are, again, super tactical, super practical for this year.
Bring it.
So number one is, for young people, how do we compete with the left in offering all the free stuff, especially loan forgiveness?
Well, I think the best thing you guys can start doing on college campus is doing some serious myth busting. You guys remember that show Mythbusters?
I love that show.
Oh, yeah, dude.
High school science class that the teacher rolled in the TV. That was the best day of the year. So break out that rolly TV and start watching those Mythbusters and do that on these college campuses. So yes, you're absolutely right. What the left is pitching and why their tactics are so attractive is because everything is free. I think this is kind of goes to my point that I made earlier, is we need to start getting emotional and explaining why it is morally good to vote conservative or support conservative and libertarian principles. We know that this generation is rejecting parties. They are rejecting the Democrat and Republican labels. We also know this generation is very altruistic. They are very benevolent. They want to feel like they're always doing the right thing. So let's meet them at the table. We know their motivations. We know their mindset. Let's take the time and explain to them. So this free education, let's talk about how that is going to hurt this mom who just wants to put dinner on the table for her kids. Let's talk about how that means the government is taking more money out of her paycheck each month. She already made a transaction with her employer, so now the government's going to come in and dip into that. I think the more personalized examples you can use, that's going to do some myth busting, that's going to get emotional, and that's going to be how conservatives win on college campuses.
That's good. And I'm going to try to do a quick version because we're winding down, and there's one that a question that came in and just made me laugh. All right, so just very quickly, maybe to Stephen. So there's somebody in the audience who works for Alliance Defending Freedom.
Love that organization.
And God bless you all, by the way.
Seriously.
Really appreciate you all. And for Alliance Defending Freedom, so for those who don't know, they represent students on campus who've had their First Amendment rights violated. And the question is, that they struggle because a lot of students fear backlash. What encouragement can you give to students to stand up for their own rights, Stephen?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. The first thing we can do is provide them with a community so they realize they're not the only person on their campus that thinks the same way that they do. And that way they'll have a backup, so to speak, people who have their back. So I think that's really essential. I think one of the best answers to this is what some fantastic student organizations do already, the ones that are on the ground. Affiliating with these people will help you be stronger, will help you be more effective in your activism in general, and leave you not alone, right? So join the student organization that makes the most sense for you. If you're more libertarian, join Young Americans for Liberty. If you love our president, you should join Turning Point USA. But those organizations are fantastic outlets for people to really have people who have your back. And then you have a community that supports you. You need a community that is there for you to take care of you. And when the bad things tend to transpire, it won't be the end of it, because then you can plan your own activism event, or again, switch from that reactive to something bad happened to me, but to a proactive, now here's what we're gonna do, right? Here's how we're gonna take action.
Yeah, roger that. So, Alexandra, next question to you. What are your thoughts on what is referred to as the campus kangaroo courts, campus disciplinary committees? What do we do?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of organizations out there that are more than willing to help with these students that are feeling like they're being abused by their campus administrators. I think sunlight is the best disinfectant. So if you see this stuff happening on your campus, subtle plug, call Leadership Institute. We'd be happy to help you. We're seeing a lot of lawsuits go through, and these students actually find success, and these schools being held accountable for their actions that are not fair towards these college students, and the disciplinary action that just isn't fair.
Yeah, get documentation and record if possible.
Yeah.
That's great. So next question to Stephen. How can college alumni help in this fight?
Absolutely. That's a fantastic question.
Stop donating.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely stop donating to that specific college or university and donate to like a student organization or a conservative organization instead, for sure.
But no, like, we laugh about it, but it happens every day. We're investing in literally a socialist meat grinder, so stop doing it.
Seriously, I completely agree. And that's when the universities start to feel the hit too, is when the alumni actually speak up and say with their dollars, I'm going to stop donating to you as an institution as long as you keep doing these particular heinous actions. But just to add on to that, one of the best things you can do is actually connect with the students on the ground. Just because you're old and they're young doesn't mean you can't be best friends, I promise you. And it reminds me of a story, actually, of one man. His name is Bill Montgomery. And he was listening to a high schooler speak at his graduation ceremony. And this high schooler was talking about free market principles, how we need to revitalize America. This old man walked up to him after his speech and said, what are you doing after you graduate? And he's like, I'm going to Baylor probably. And he said, you can't go to Baylor. You have to start a youth organization. You have to get this involved. That man is Charlie Kirk, and he started Turning Point USA. And that started from an old man telling a college student, almost college student, that he needed to take action. And so other ways you can do that, donating to your local chapter instead of the national organization, actually going to one of their meetings, which are publicly posted most times, but to play an active role, actually go to that meeting and start talking to them, and they'll tell you specifically how you can help.
So, and just quickly, because we're right up against our time, I'm going to ask you guys to maybe plug the Leadership Institute quickly. Alexandra, tell everybody how they can engage. And then I have the last question. I'm going to end this with a question, and we're all going to laugh together.
Let's do it.
As we help someone get a little clarity. And we have a north of the border Canadian in the room, and they asked a question that just makes me grin.
Amazing.
So why don't you talk to us about how do we engage with Leadership Institute?
Sure thing. If you are a student on a college campus, reach out to our national field director. We have a whole campus leadership program where we have 12 regional field coordinators that exist solely to make sure that these students on college campuses have the resources and support they need to be successful and hopefully combat some of this leftist abuse we're seeing. You can also reach out to me. My training is called the Youth Leadership School. It is a political boot camp in which you get youth campaign certified, so you know how to organize and communicate for any candidate or cause that you're passionate about organizing around. Those are my programs I'm particularly involved in. I'll let Stephen plug his.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to add that the Leadership Institute is for conservatives of all ages who want to win. From on-camera TV training to campaign management school, we want more conservatives to start taking the battle to college campuses and also to the political sphere as a whole. We need more people involved, and we have too many people on the sidelines right now. It's very easy to sit down, it's very easy to complain, it's very easy to talk, but we need to take action. So I encourage you, even if you don't take one of our trainings, which I do encourage you to do, to just start doing something. Please please do something. Because I feel like that meme who's like a stick figure who has a stick and it's like pointing at something. It's like, come on, do something. I feel like that's me sometimes with some conservatives. So let's just take action. Let's start doing things.
So I'm going to wrap up with just picking up on what Stephen just said, and I'm going to wrap up with this question. It's going to be an audience participation question. Well, I don't need Stephen and Alexandra to answer it. We can all answer it for this person. But I think it's been said many, many times by different people in different eras, but the truth is, you are not what you think. You are what you do. Mm. And the reality that you live in is the one that you choose to live in. So if you think you're a victim or a prisoner, you're a prisoner only of your own mind. And we all have choices to make this year on how we see the world, how we interact, how we spend our time. And I think, again, our fantastic panel has been able to help us maybe clarify how some choices we ought to make this year. So I'm going to wrap it up. Again, for the benefit of a north of the border neighbor, God bless you all up there in Canada. Here's the question. I just want everybody, this is now audience participation. What are the two things we shouldn't talk about? P.S. I'm from Canada.
Oh, my goodness.
What are they? Religion and politics. Thank you. All right. God bless everybody. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks so much for watching. To see our latest video, click here. And to make sure you don't miss any future videos, be sure to subscribe. And since you're still here, give this video a thumbs up.